Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of English Talk Podcast. I'm Isabella, your enthusiastic guide to mastering English.
And I'm Patrick, here to help make learning English fun, engaging, and dare I say, a piece of cake.
Speaking of a piece of cake, that's actually what we're diving into today. Idioms and expressions. You know, those quirky phrases that make English so colorful and, let's be honest, sometimes a bit confusing.
Exactly. Like when someone says they need to break the ice, but there's no ice in sight. It can leave you scratching your head if you're not familiar with the expression.
But don't worry, that's why we're here. In today's episode, we're going to explore what idioms are, why they're such an important part of English, and how you can use them to sound more natural and fluent.
And not just that, we'll also share some practical examples, talk about idioms you can use in everyday conversations, and even introduce a few fun ones from around the English-speaking world.
You'll leave this episode not just understanding idioms, but feeling confident enough to use them in your own conversations. So whether you're chatting with friends, writing an email, or watching a TV show, you'll start picking up on these expressions everywhere.
And hey, if you're thinking, idioms are too hard, I'll never get them, remember, it's all about practice and context. By the end of this episode, you might even have a few favorites to share with us.
So stick around as we unpack the wonderful, sometimes wacky world of idioms and expressions. Let's get started. Let's dive right into the fascinating world of idioms. Patrick, how about we start with one of my favorites, break the ice.
Yes. Break the ice is such a versatile idiom. It means to initiate a conversation or activity to make people feel more comfortable. For example, if you're at a party and no one's talking, you might share a funny story to break the ice.
Exactly. It's like an opener to make things less awkward. You can also use it in professional settings. Imagine a work meeting where everyone is silent. Starting with a lighthearted comment can help break the ice.
Speaking of sharing things, let's talk about spill the beans.
Ooh, I love this one. To spill the beans means to reveal a secret, often accidentally. Picture this. You're planning a surprise birthday party for a friend, and someone lets it slip during lunch. They've spilled the beans.
And this idiom is great for casual settings, like conversations with friends or family. I wasn't supposed to know about the engagement, but Sarah spilled the beans.
Another classic is a piece of cake. Patrick, what comes to mind when you hear this one?
Well, aside from dessert, a piece of cake means something that's really easy to do. For instance, learning how to use this app was a piece of cake.
Right. And it's a fun, lighthearted way to say something wasn't challenging. You'll often hear this in informal situations like talking about school assignments, simple tasks, or even daily chores.
Here's another idiom we've all heard, hit the nail on the head. It means to describe something perfectly or to be absolutely correct.
Yes, like when someone guesses exactly why you're upset, you can say, "You've hit the nail on the head." This one works well in both formal and informal conversations.
Let's not forget under the weather. It means feeling slightly sick or unwell. If someone says, "I'm feeling under the weather today," it's usually a polite way to let you know they're not at their best.
That's such a good one because it's so relatable. And here's another fun one. The ball is in your court. This means it's someone's turn to take action or make a decision.
A classic example might be during a negotiation or planning session. I've given you all the details, so now the ball is in your court. It's often used in both professional and personal contexts.
And that brings us to on cloud nine. This idiom describes someone who's extremely happy or elated.
That's a good one to end on for now. For instance, she was on cloud nine after getting the promotion. It's such a vivid way to express happiness.
So listeners, those were just a few everyday idioms you'll hear often in English conversations.
And remember, context is key. Knowing when to use these idioms can make your English sound more fluent and natural.
Up next, we'll explore some tricky idioms and expressions that can confuse even advanced learners. Stick around. Back. Now that we've explored some everyday idioms, let's move on to the tricky ones. Those expressions that even advanced learners sometimes find confusing. Patrick, have you ever had an idiom trip you up?
Oh, absolutely. One that threw me off at first was bite the bullet. It means to face something difficult or unpleasant with courage. For example, if you're nervous about going to the dentist, you might say, "I'll just bite the bullet and make the appointment."
That's a great one, and it's not about actual bullets, thankfully. It's often used in situations where you have to do something you've been avoiding.
Exactly. Another tricky one is kick the bucket. This idiom is a euphemism for dying, and while it's often used humorously, it can be a little startling if you don't know the context.
Yes, for For instance, someone might say, "If I ever kick the bucket, I hope someone takes care of my plants." It's not a serious conversation starter, but it's definitely memorable.
Here's one I've heard used incorrectly a lot. Costs an arm and a leg.
Oh, that's a classic. It means something is extremely expensive, not that you're literally paying with limbs. For example, that designer bag costs an arm and a leg.
And it's worth noting that this idiom is great for informal conversations. But how about one that's often misunderstood? Let the cat out of the bag.
I love this one. It means to reveal a secret, usually accidentally. For example, she let the cat out of the bag about the surprise party.
And speaking of cats, there's also raining cats and dogs. This one confuses a lot of learners because it sounds so strange.
True, it simply means it's raining heavily. You could say, "Don't forget your umbrella. It's raining cats and dogs out there."
Here's one more tricky idiom, burning the midnight oil. This means working late into the night, often to meet a deadline or finish a project.
Yes, like when students cram for exams or when someone's finishing a big presentation. For example, she's been burning the midnight oil all week to finish her thesis.
Another idiom that trips people up is hit the books. It doesn't mean physically hitting anything. It's just a casual way of saying you're going to study hard.
Exactly. You might hear students say, "I have an exam tomorrow, so I need to hit the books tonight."
And here's a fun one. Throw in the towel. It's borrowed from boxing and means to give up or admit defeat.
Like, after hours of trying to fix my laptop, I finally threw in the towel and called tech support.
It's such a visual idiom, but if you're not familiar with boxing, it might be confusing.
And that's why we're here, to break down these tricky expressions. So listeners, don't be afraid to experiment with idioms in your conversations.
Yes, practice is key. Next, we'll explore idioms related to specific themes like work, love, and travel. Stay with us.
Welcome back. In this final part, we'll dive into idioms tied to specific themes: work, love, and travel. These are super useful because they come up all the time in everyday conversations.
Absolutely. Let's kick things off with work-related idioms. One of my favorites is "the ball is in your court." It means it's your turn to make a decision or take action.
Exactly. For example, "I've sent you all the details. Now the ball is in your court." It's a great way to politely nudge someone to take responsibility.
Another one is to climb the corporate ladder. This refers to advancing in your career or gaining promotions.
Like, she's been working hard to climb the corporate ladder and become a manager. A very professional idiom for business settings.
And let's not forget pulling your weight. It means doing your fair share of the work.
Yes, you might hear, "We need everyone on the team to pull their weight to meet this deadline." A great phrase for teamwork dynamics.
How about we move to idioms about love now?
Oh, this will be fun. One of the most popular idioms is to sweep someone off their feet. It means to impress someone greatly, often romantically.
Yes. For example, when they met, he swept her off her feet with his charm and kindness. It's a lovely way to describe falling in love.
Another romantic idiom is head over heels. This means to be completely in love with someone.
Like, she's head over heels for her new partner. It's such a visual way to describe deep affection.
And here's a good one, to have a change of heart. It's not limited to love, but it often refers to a change in feelings or decisions.
For instance, he was hesitant about dating again, but after meeting her, he had a change of heart.
Now let's talk about travel-related idioms. A fun one is to hit the road. It means to leave or start a journey.
Like, we're all packed and ready to hit the road for our weekend getaway. It's such a casual and friendly way to talk about travel.
Another is living out of a suitcase. It means traveling frequently, often without staying in one place for long.
Exactly. For example, as a consultant, she's been living out of a suitcase for months. A relatable phrase for many frequent travelers.
And let's not forget off the beaten path. It describes exploring less popular or unconventional destinations.
Yes, like, they love finding places off the beaten path to avoid the tourist crowds. A perfect phrase for adventurous spirits.
One last travel idiom I love is to get your bearings. It means figuring out where you are or what's going on, especially in a new place.
Great example. After arriving in the city, we took a moment to get our bearings before exploring. It's practical and fun.
Idioms add so much color to our language, don't they? Whether you're working, falling in love, or traveling the world, there's an expression for every moment.
And the more you use them, the more natural they'll feel in conversation. Coming up next, we'll recap everything we've learned and share tips for practicing idioms in your daily life.
Exciting journey through the world of idioms and expressions. We've explored everyday idioms, themed phrases for work, love, and travel, and even shared tips to use them effectively.
Absolutely. Remember, Idioms are like spices, they add flavor to your English. But it's okay if they feel a little tricky at first. Practice makes perfect, and the more you hear and use them, the more natural they'll become.
Today's episode gave us so many fun examples. From breaking the ice to hitting the road, these phrases can make your conversations more lively and engaging.
And don't forget our tip, pay attention to context. Knowing when and where to use an idiom is just as important as knowing its meaning.
Now, we'd love to hear from you. Which idioms from today's episode are your favorites? Or do you have any that you use all the time? Share them with us on social media using the hashtag #SpeakLikeANative.
Yes, and if you've got questions or suggestions for future episodes, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help you on your English learning journey.
Before we go, here's a challenge for you. Try using at least one idiom from today's episode in your next conversation. It could be with a friend, a colleague, or even in your journal.
Great idea, Isabella. Small steps like these can make a big difference over time.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with anyone you know who's learning English.
And stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll explore phrasal verbs and how to use them like a pro. You won't want to miss it.
Until next time, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep having fun with English.
Bye for now.